It's been about a week since the Uvalde shooting massacre happened, and we still don't have a whole lot of really good information. Plus, a lot of the information we had in the beginning had changed. So I just want to talk about my take on it, what we can learn, and some questions that I would like to see answered. And I have a little bit different take than what I've been hearing, which is really why I want to make this video. First, let me welcome you, friends and frenemies. This is the place where we apply logic and conviction to news, politics, fitness, events, and whatever other kind of things are going on. I'm C. Scott, and this is my view. So like I said earlier, about a week ago, it was a terrible, sad, disgusting shooting that happened at an elementary school in Uvalde. I'm sure you have many of the details. There's a whole lot of information, other videos that you can watch, but I just want to go through the event. As always, talk about what we can learn, things that could prevent it in the future. Also want to look at some questions that are being asked and I don't think they're being answered, but then there's also some people that are leveling some accusations, in particular at the police, and I have some questions about that too. So let's go through the event. Somewhere around 11 o'clock, crazy 18-year-old shoots his grandmother in the face with some guns that apparently they didn't know he takes her truck. For some unknown reason, he crashes the truck in the ditch kind of across the street or intersection from where the school is. Then some people from down the street come out to help and see what's going on. He starts to fire at them. Apparently he walks towards the school and starts to fire at the school from the outside. And then apparently he goes around the side of the school and is able to get into the school through an unlocked door. And he goes and gets into a classroom, locks himself into the classroom, and murders way too many people. And it's so sad. It's a sad situation because the number of people lost their lives. It's sad because they were children, and it's really sad and disgusting because it could have and should have been prevented. But we're going to talk a little bit about that. A lot of the information has changed from the first reports that we received. A lot of things have been updated. A lot of things that were reported by Texas DPS and reported by news agencies have actually been retracted and said that they were false. And so there's a lot of attention on this case. And one of the primary issues with that, I believe, is we the people, or more importantly, the news media's lust to get the story out immediately, and they don't wait for accurate or right information, and they rush in. They always want to report details. They always want to talk to somebody over here and talk to somebody over there. And I believe some of the bad reporting was because of Texas DPS actually probably hearing news reports and thinking some of that was true. So instead of waiting for information to be corroborated, fact-checked, and detailed, they put out information too early, both the news media as well as Texas DPS. Texas DPS is basically the state policing bureau or agency for the state of Texas. And so Uvalde is a real small town. I knew some people who were from Uvalde when I used to live in San Antonio. And, you know, it's a small town. It's almost like considered a border town. And it's a couple hours away from San Antonio, and so it's a small place, and so they had the state police that were supposed to be coming in and taking over. So the first 3 days of the incident, the Tuesday it happened, the Wednesday, and then Thursday, Texas DPS had 3 different people who were given the press conferences. The first guy gave whatever information was available to him, the next guy made some corrections but gave information that was him, and then the third guy was the director, the main man over Texas DPS. Now, during this time, they're getting a lot of questions and aggression from the news media when it wasn't even their agency that was responsible for the overall event and the decisions that were made and things that happened. So part of the fault, you know, is of course on the media trying to get the story out and pushing. But ultimately, I think the responsibility falls on Texas DPS. They just should not have given out information before the information was checked and verified. And there needs to be some kind of policy that says we're not going to give you much information, detailed information, until 24 or 48 hours after an event like this, so that we can make sure we have right, accurate information. But that's just me. What do I know? So in this discussing situation and situations like it, we often want to ask, why? Why does this happen? I don't know. Why does it happen? It happens because there's evil in the world. It happens because there is Satan is out there and he is influencing and trying to wreak havoc. And there are people that don't believe in Satan. There are people that don't believe in evil. But what else do you call this? This is an evil act. This is not something that people just kind of sit up and come up with on their own. It's evil. It's designed to hurt. It's designed to frustrate. It's designed to cause pain. And for all the people that don't believe in evil and say we're just like animals and things like that, you don't see that in the animal kingdom. There's always a reason that one animal attacks another. There are animals who kill the young ones of like another group of animals that, they took over, like the lions. If one lion comes into a pride and he defeats the old lion or the lion that used to be in charge, that lion will kill the old lion's young cubs. And he's doing that because he wants to get rid of that line. He wants to get rid of, as we would understand it, someone that would maybe come after him later, or he's just trying to deal with the bloodline. But he's not killing all the babies. He's not always going to be killing every young cub. And so we can't say that this happens in nature, in the wild. There aren't any sharks or fish that are going out and just killing all the other fish and things like that. I believe it's directly attributed to evil and satanic demonic influence in the lives of men. So why to me is not really that big of a deal, because who cares about the why? We need to focus on the what and stopping it and not letting it happen. So who do we blame in a situation like this? Well, of course, number one, you blame the killer. He's the one that made the decision, made the plans, and carried out the act. Even though I believe he was influenced by Satan, we can't blame Satan for what a person decided to do. Yes, he was a heavy influencer. Yes, I believe it is satanic influence, but he's the man, he's the person that decided to do what the influencer said. Satan can't do anything on his own. Just like God, he has to be able to get a person to act on his behalf. So you have to blame the killer. Now, a lot of this immediately comes out like Sheila Jackson Lee and, don't really want to play politics, but you always see Democrats and those on the left immediately come out and say that it's because of guns, and they want to blame the availability of guns, and they want to blame the NRA, the National Rifle Association, which really has nothing to do with anything. They blame the NRA, literally blaming the NRA for kids that got killed in Uvalde, which is disgusting, and it just is illogical. It doesn't make sense. You should blame those that are actually involved and those that made the bad decisions. So next on my list to blame is, well, do we need to blame the killer's family? They're the ones that were supposed to be keeping an eye on this kid. They're the ones that were supposed to be raising him right. He lived with his grandparents, which is a tough thing. But, there was something going on with his mom where he didn't live with his mom. And apparently he got into fights with his grandparents. And apparently he was known to Uvalde law enforcement, which originally in the information they were given, Texas DPS said that they did not know him. But Texas DPS didn't know him, but I believe Uvalde did because of domestic disturbance disputes or whatever that were going on between him and his grandparents. And I'm not sure if they had ever been called with incidents with the shooter and his mom. But what about the family? They're the ones that should know him the best. They're the ones that should know if he has firearms, which he apparently got a couple weeks before the shooting on his 18th birthday. They're the ones that should be able to see changes in his behavior. They're the ones that knew that he dropped out of school a year before. And so they are probably the closest people to the killer that would be able to identify if something was going on. So there's always a lot of blame. Right now, there's blame on the NRA, there's blame on the Second Amendment, and there's blame on the police, which we'll talk about in just a moment. None of those, I believe, are accurate or should be blamed. And we'll talk about particularly the police part of that in just a moment. There's a caveat to that. We still don't know exactly what went on with the police. But before we go holding the NRA and its members responsible, before we blame the Second Amendment of our United States Constitution and its availability, our availability to have firearms, before we go blaming the millions of firearms and firearm owners in the United States who have and carry weapons every single day without incident, before we go blaming them, there's a lot of other things and people that we really should be looking at. If we're gonna blame anybody other than the shooter, I think you need to start with the family. I'm not saying that I believe the family should be charged or indicted or anything like that, but that's a much more important conversation than thinking about stripping people's rights or blaming the NRA. Third on the list, this is a heavy one, but we have to say it. What about the teachers? Apparently, the shooter got into the school because the teacher propped the door open to go get something from lunch. And then she saw what was going on down the street when he crashed his car and he shot around at some other people. So then she leaves the door open, runs to her classroom and grabs her phone, which should be on you, ladies. Why do we have to keep having this conversation? Your cell phone is supposed to be on you so that you can use it when you need to use it. But supposedly she goes back to the room, gets the phone, comes back out, calls 911. And the original reports were that she left the door open. She came out after and said that she had slammed it shut and for some reason it didn't lock. Now that I don't believe. That sounds to me like a CYA. I don't want to put a bunch of blame on her, but we have to take a grown-up look and see what happened. Exterior door to a school should not have been unlocked. One of the reasons I don't really believe that story right away is because it doesn't really make sense. Number one, at least since 2019 in Texas, all the doors on a school are supposed to lock and be locked from the outside, and you have a push bar which you can access from the inside. Now, if there was a problem with that door, it would have been known ahead of time. She wouldn't have had to prop the door open with a rock because the door was already broken and it didn't lock. So she is saying now that she closed the door and it didn't lock. So she's saying that there was a malfunction on the door, but it was a door that she was leaving to go and get, her lunch or something out of her car, which says to me that that was a door that she had probably, or other teachers had probably done that before. If there was a malfunction, they would have known about it ahead of time and it wouldn't have been brand new. She would have known that that was the case. And again, she wouldn't have had to prop it open because it would not have locked. The other reason I don't believe it is because if it wasn't malfunctioning previously, then we're to believe that all of a sudden, when there's a killer on the loose, now the door doesn't operate. Now she slams the door, which she said, and for some reason at this specific moment, something happens. I don't believe that. And again, I don't want a bunch of blame to come down to her. Not saying that she should be arrested, but we have to look at what happened. Had that exterior door been closed and locked, this is a totally different story. The police were able to get there in 4 minutes. He may have never actually been able to get into the school. Other thing we have to look at is why was the classroom door open and unlocked? And when school is in session, when class is being taught, at least in Texas, after 2019 Santa Fe shooting, when class is in session, doors are supposed to be locked. They have a metal door, which is very hard to breach, which is something that we'll talk about in a moment, but the doors are supposed to be locked. How did he get into an unlocked door from the outside, walk down the hall, and get into another unlocked door in the classroom? I don't want to come across like I'm putting all the blame on the teachers, but just like we say police and fire and other people have responsibility to do things, these teachers had a responsibility, and we can't point all the fingers at other places and people who weren't responsible at the time. If I'm a teacher and I'm responsible for this class, I can't blame the police officers for not doing something when I'm the one that exposed the children that were under my care. And we have to have this a grown-up adult conversation and be able to speak the truth. Right now, they are talking about bills in our Congress that are designed to strip legal, law-abiding American citizens of constitutional rights, instead of actually talking about things that can actually happen to fix the problem. So the other thing, like I said, they want to blame is the police response. So right now, what we understand is that the commander on scene believed that the situation had switched from an active shooter to a barricaded subject. You don't need to go barreling in on a barricaded subject. One, that's going to get a bunch of officers killed. Two, it's not a time-sensitive issue and things change. DPS director came out and said that that was the wrong decision. And of course, we can see that and understand that in hindsight. And so, you know, people want to make a big deal. They say there were 5 and then 12 and then 19 officers who were hunkered down in the hallway. A lot of people are calling them cowards. They're saying that they were scared. But what we do know is that they waited for a border patrol SWAT team to get there, and that they breached the door with a key. I don't know why they keep saying they breached the door, but they opened it with a key that they had to wait to get from the janitor. And then they went in and neutralized the subject. So a lot of people are blaming the police, saying that they should have gone in sooner. They should have gone in sooner. My big question is how? It was a metal door. It opened from the outside. So it's not like they could have rammed it and pushed it in. It opened from the outside, which those doors are notoriously difficult to breach. And then the shooter would sometimes shoot at or through the door or something like that. But all in all, after they waited, after the SWAT team got there, after, you know, some guy said, these guys are cowards, we're going in, they still had to wait and use a key from the janitor. So I don't understand why everybody is blaming the cops and saying that they were too slow when they were scared and they were hunkered down hiding in the hallway, but they had to wait for a key. And so in the hallway, they were making sure the shooter couldn't escape out of that classroom and cause more harm. They said he fired like 100 rounds, maybe even before the cops got onto the scene. So yes, there were lives that were in there, but we have to think in terms of maximizing life, and containment is one of the strategies that you use in law enforcement to limit casualties. You contain the shooter to one area, and even though you may not be able to protect everybody in that area, you at least keep that shooter from going from that area to another area and being able to cause more damage. It's very difficult, it's very sad, but that's the truth. And so again, for all the people that are calling the police cowards, I'm curious as what you wanted them to do. I do believe, which I haven't heard anybody else say, maybe they could have busted a window out and tried to shoot in from the window. Of course, if you do that, you have to be concerned with his rifle shooting out the window, and if there are houses or businesses or anything on the other side of that, it could have been some kind of collaborative aspect of them trying to go through the door and the window at the same time. But again, if there's a door that you can't breach because it was made to help in active shooter situations, but we got messed up because the shooter got on the other side of that same door that was designed to keep him out. So again, if you have to wait for the key, why are we yelling at the cops and calling them cowards? So obviously, I don't believe we need to blame the Constitution or gun owners. The Constitution was written very specifically and explicitly. We are supposed to have rights to guns for very important reasons, which I don't want to take time to go over here. But again, there are millions of guns in the US, and there's a very small number of school shootings or these type of events. And so we really have to weigh, should everybody's rights be taken away because there's a few morons that do terrible, disgusting things that we can do other things to stop? I do believe that we can put some blame on our culture. The same people that are decrying the lives of these lives of these kids that were lost are still also the same ones that don't mind babies being aborted in the womb. They don't mind the drug use and the defilement of our culture. We have a lot of people in our culture who belittle life, who don't believe in the sanctity of life, who don't care about people, morality, how we treat each other. And those are the same people that get upset when people go crazy and do things like this. Well, I believe our culture feeds into this. What about the news media? Do we have any blame that goes for the news media? Why does the news media continue to show killers' faces? Why do they continue to tell their names and tell their stories? They give them some type of superstar status. I should know what the killer in Uvalde looks like. I don't need to know his name. By doing that, we make them infamous, and that is part of why they do what they do. I believe there needs to be an absolute blackout where obviously you can go and search public records if you need to, but we shouldn't be showing the killer's face day after day after day, not one time. And we don't need to say his name. That notoriety if that is something that causes them to do what they do, which killers in the past have said they do it to be popular, if that's something that we know, I believe the news media needs to take that under advisement and stop making these people famous. That's one of the things that can happen right away that'll help change future events. Trying to get through this quickly and not have a long video, but it is what it is. How can we respond? I believe as believers, we need to pray in response, pray for everybody that's involved, both directly and indirectly, and pray for our schools and areas. We also need to be patient for info. We can't be, staring at the TV all day. We can't be wanting more up-to-date, accurate information minutes after incidents have happened, because that's how we get misinformation. I believe we need to show love and even evangelize. Even in times when people are scared or people are hurting, that's a time when people need to know Jesus. That's not a time where we just sit back and say, oh, I don't want to use this time to proselytize. No, that is the time that you use. If people are hurting and you believe that Jesus is the answer, that's the time when you offer up that answer. Democrats or certain politicians, even some on the Republican side, they don't waste any time talking about taking away people's rights and things that we need to change, which would not have changed this situation in the least. They talk about red flag laws, wouldn't have changed. They talk about limiting and getting rid of assault rifles and things like that going into the future. It's not going to change the outcome because the guns are still going to be out there and they'll still be able to be used. Like, Chris Murphy has been getting a lot of attention. The list of things that he wants to do are things that would not have changed the shooting at all. If you want to have a discussion about raising the age of buying weapons, I could understand that in this case. I don't agree with it, but that's a discussion that you could have because that's something that would have changed this outcome. But most of the things that they offer up in the way of gun control or this legislation that they talk about would not have changed the situation. So anyway, what we can do to respond is to offer love, to be there for people, and we need to tell them about Jesus and the impact that he could have on their lives. We can give money, we can volunteer if we're close enough to the places where these impacts are happening. We can give blood and donate blood. Those are things that they need. We can fill gaps and try and help people in response to terrible events like this. The other thing that we need to do in response is not being bullied to give up your rights. Do not allow others to pressurize you and say that you somehow had something to do with this thing, or you having your rights or exercising your rights somehow opens the door or causes these terrible things to happen. They go straight to restricting the rights of U.S. citizens as opposed to doing things that actually stop these killers from killing. I really don't even believe saving lives is important to them because what they promote aren't the things that are going to save lives. And the things that are going to save lives, they ignore those things and say they're either not enough or they're not important. And the last thing I think we need to do in response to things like this are we need to push for our point of view. We need to push that schools should not be gun-free zones. Killer after killer have already told us that they go to the places they go because they're going to get little to no resistance. Schools should not be gun-free zones. That just makes them soft targets, begging out for people to come and do terrible things there. With the time this guy had and the exposure that he probably could have gotten at least close to the same body count with a machete. If he's able to walk into the school, if he's able to barricade himself in a schoolroom with people that are helpless and defenseless, he could do the same thing with a long knife or a machete. And that's not hyperbolic. That's not a stretch. He could have done the same thing with a machete, given this exact same situation. And it may have taken the police longer to get there and respond because there would have been no 911 calls when people heard gunfire, which means it would have taken even longer for them to get to the school. And they still would not have been able to get through the metal door that opens from the outside. So when we talk about how we can prevent these things from happening, the most important thing right now is to follow the current policies and procedures. The current policies and procedures would have prevented this event from being what it was. Locked doors would have helped. We don't know about the policies of the police and active shooters that they're supposed to go right in and confront the shooter. They weren't able to do that because of this metal door that they were not able to get through. So I'm not sure yet what police response needs to be different, but we also know that the current policies and procedures would work, because time after time we see that they were not in place or they were not employed and killers were able to kill. Another thing we need to do is to verify or encourage schools and teachers to abide by those policies. We need to verify if we can get into a school, or if we go drop our kids off at school, you turn around and go see if you can get back in, which is one of the things a guy named Andrew Pollock, he had a child that was lost in the Parkland shooting, was one of the things that he said. He said, you know, you drop your kids off for school and then you go back and see if you can get in. If you can't get in, that's a good thing. But if you can get in, if you're finding ways in, bad people can find ways in too. So verify your kids' school, the schools that are in your area. If you just want to be a good citizen, go check around the schools in your neighborhood and see. Even if you're asking them, obviously you don't want to do things that are going to get you in trouble or make you look like a creeper, but you want to find out, are the doors locked? Do they have policies? Are they acting by those policies? More importantly, another thing I think we can do to help discourage these events, particularly for elementary schools, is to raise the fence. They have like 4-foot fencing at the school in Uvalde, and the elementary schools around my house have very short fences. Fences give you time. No, we don't need razor fences that are 20 feet high and things like that, but we do need a 6 or 7 foot chain link fence, or maybe a different type of fence that's a little bit more difficult to scale. We have lots and lots of money that's been made available, particularly in Texas, particularly through the COVID legislation and stuff like that. There's lots of money that's been available. If you have a higher fence, it takes that much more time for someone to get over it, and there's that much more time for the good people to react and respond. This killer hopped over the fence, and it probably took him 10 seconds because it was a really short fence. So I think a really easy, quick fix that will help the situation along, or help avoid these situations, is just making a taller fence. One of the things I forgot to go over in our blame section was the COVID lockdowns. This shooter dropped out of school when they shut the schools down for COVID. The same COVID, again, that wasn't a big effect on kids, that kids did not have a difficult time with. They shut the schools down, sent everybody home, and that's when this kid really fell off the radar. That's when he quit going to school. That's when we don't know exactly what he was doing, who he was spending his time with, and that's probably the time where he was getting these ideas to do this dastardly, terrible, disgusting deed. And so again, the things that we allowed and did during COVID are coming back to bite us in spades, but we can't forget that. Another thing you can do to prevent these things from happening is find out how recent your school's training, or the school in your area's training, is. Have they gone through their drills recently? Ask questions, just whatever pops up in your mind. What would you do if this situation happened? What are y'all supposed to do if that situation happens? These are the things, some of the things, even more reasons that we should be going to school board meetings, not just CRT, not just some of the other craziness, but we need to be talking about the security situations in these schools. Not much different than some of the things that happened in the Michigan school shooting that I did a video on in Oxford not too long ago. The schools and the teachers are part of the safekeeping of our children. Another thing that we need to do in culture and society is that we just need to report things that are going on. Apparently, the killer in Uvalde, he tortured animals. He picked with people. He shot random people with BB guns, all these different kind of things. All those things need to be reported to law enforcement so they can begin to make a file, so they can begin to get a pattern of behavior. I mean, torturing animals for a long time has been something that would help identify like serial killers, for instance. And so when we see these things, we do need to develop somewhat of in our culture, if you see something, say something, so that these things can be documented. And that's when the authorities can go in and say, look, we're having some really bad information about this person. Maybe we need to get them help. Or, you know, they can connect the dots when they have a bunch of dots to connect. But if the family members, if the friends, if the coworkers, if the other students, if nobody is saying anything when it happens, then it seems like these big events come out of the blue, but they really didn't. we just kept it all to ourselves. And then when they do something, then we have this person saying they saw this, and this person, they testified about that, and this other person, they remember something. Well, that information would have been helpful yesterday. Last thing was maybe one of the biggest things that we can do to help prevent these things from ever happening again is to be armed, to be trained, and to be ready to help out. There's a video I'm going to link in the bottom, and there was a guy that said that he believes that if he was armed, that he would have been able to do something in this instance, but he didn't have his gun on him. Guns are no good when they're not around, when you can't use them. We as American citizens need to be armed, we need to be trained, and we need to be really willing and ready to jump in and bring these situations to an end, possibly being able to bring them to an end before they get started. There were several people that were engaged, several people that were in the neighborhood, and there were several minutes from the time that this bad guy crashed the truck and before he got into the school. Lots of people could have, would have, should have been able to bring that thing to an end. We saw it happen also here in Texas, unfortunately, where there was a church shooting, and Steve Williford was able to run out of his house and grab his gun and bring that situation to an end. It's unfortunate, but that's the times we live in, when we live in this amoral or disgustingly immoral society. The gun genie's not going in the bottle. You can't get rid of all the guns. We can talk about gun control. Maybe I'll do another video on that, my thoughts for that. But these are the things I believe that can help deal with the next potential shooting, or things that would help secure our schools from here to the future. What do you think? Let me know. You can write it in the comments. You think I'm full of crap? You think I'm onto something? Do you know what the police should have done in dealing with a locked metal door that opened to the outside? Let me know in the comments if you like or agree. Definitely hit that like button, and don't forget to share this video with some other people that you think need the information. All right, thanks for being here. We talked about the Uvalde shooting. I'm C. Scott, and that's how I see it.